Welcome to Indie Capital. I'm Pamela Nash with Eric Espejo, and we are going to be talking about his film, Ghosts Don't Exist. Eric, tell us a little about the process of getting this film made.
So Ghosts Don't Exist was a pretty long process. We started back in 2007. The concept originally came from something that I thought of when I was watching a lot of the ghost hunting shows. A lot of my friends are fans of that, and I've been a skeptic of that. And I always thought, what would be the worst thing that could happen on a ghost hunt? And came up with a concept, pitched it to 19th and Wilson. And we thought it was a great horror genre to go forward with as far as indie film. And we started to look for, after, of course, finishing the script, we started to look for funding. And I happened to send an email to Chris Cooley's blog, and he responded positively. And his brother, Tanner Cooley, also responded. And we met with them, pitched them the project. We basically clicked. And they decided to jump on board, and he was able to propel the project through helping us find financing. And after that, it's basically a long process of getting a lot of local talent, local cast and crew. And we shot a pretty good low-budget horror pick in the area. And it exceeded our expectations. We got domestic distribution. We just learned actually recently that we got UK distribution. So this is DVD, of course, not theatrical. Mm-hmm. So it's been a long time.
But that's fantastic. I mean, you've been out on DVD for, what, a month, and you've got distribution in the US and the UK?
We actually released in 2010.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My mistake. Was that September 2010? Did I get my math wrong?
Yeah, I think it was about around that time that it released. And we premiered at the DCIFF.
Very cool. Very cool. So I want to talk a little bit about the genre idea. Usually people don't start off with, I don't believe in this. I think I'll make a film about it. Mm-hmm. So what was that like? Did you convince yourself during the process?
Don't believe in what? What do you mean by that?
Well, you said you didn't believe in these ghost hunters and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
So did you start to come towards where you convince yourself of it, or?
No, actually, it's funny because I made some of the actors go through a ghost hunt, an actual ghost hunt with DC Mag, which is the area that taps the Atlantic Paranormal Society. Mm-hmm. There is an affiliate here, which was DC Mag with John Warfield, and I made the actors go on a ghost hunt, and I joined them. And I was always skeptical. I didn't feel anything, but some of the actors did, and so. But I never felt anything. Some of the actors said they felt something on set. I did not, but you know, Ghosts Don't Exist is really a film that at the end you don't really know exactly if it was paranormal or not. So. Of course, I just gave away the ending, but you know, it leaves it up to the mind to interpret what's real or not, and that's kind of, you know, we want that discussion to happen afterwards.
And how did you build a story around that idea?
Well, the story goes that a ghost hunter's wife dies, and he's going to retire from the business, and because he's maybe had some backstory in himself that he's kind of misled the public himself, but. He gets a phone call from someone who says that they'll prove to him that ghosts exist if he comes for one last investigation. So he goes there, and basically the gentleman says, I'll prove to you, I'll help you make contact myself, and he shoots himself in front of them. So that hook in itself drew me to the story. That's basically what I came up with. Like I said, I was trying to come up with something that was the worst thing that could happen on a ghost hunt. Mm-hmm. If a guy shoots himself in front of the ghost hunters and say, stay tonight because I'll help you make contact with the dead, and kills himself in front of them, that's pretty much where it came from.
Tell us a little bit about what we're going to see in the trailer.
You're going to see the production quality that got us some sort of attention, and also this was something that I pitched to Ronna Wallace, who ended up being our producer's rep for the film, who I can't say more things good enough about her. She's incredible, and she was the executive producer on Reservoir Dogs. She has over 20 years in the business. She repped Open Water, which was the shark movie, if you recall, the mm-hmm. horror movie. And that's where, when I read the story about what happened with Open Water, because Open Water was basically shot on mini DV, and was a very, very low budget film that took place mostly in the water. And she was able to sell that at Sundance. It got into Sundance, and I read about Ronna Wallace and her dealing with Lionsgate for Open Water. And I contacted her through an email, and she responded and asked to see some footage of our movie, and I sent her the trailer, and she liked it. And after some meetings that lasted, or not meetings, but correspondence through email and phone calls, she agreed to represent it, and she was able to get us the distribution deal.
Let's take a look at the trailer.
So clearly, you have your fans. So what's next for the show? What do you want to talk about?
You want an exclusive? How's this? I'm retiring.
They want a series finale. One last show. They've been good to you, Brett. You owe them.
I don't owe them shit.
I got a client.
I've seen Nicole.
This isn't amusing.
He guarantees you'll find activity at his place.
No. That was another call about the Walters house.
You're not going up there, are you?
We've investigated hundreds of places where people have died, Richie. It's what we do. You asked me what I heard. Multiple voices, but one said, "Come down to me." Let her go.
We gotta get out of here.
You sound like you're very proactive. You go out and you contact people and you tell them about your film. You don't kind of just throw it out into festivals and cross your fingers. Mm-hmm. So what does that take to have to go out there and put yourself out there like that?
Learning the business first. That's the biggest thing. You know, I say this and it sounds corny, but it's not show art, it's show business. And that is the biggest thing that we've done as 19th and Wilson is understood and learned the business before we actually went out and looked for investors and got a business plan together. And knowing how the process works from A to Z, you're able to contact the right people, surround yourself with the right people before you go into a project. You have to know who your first people are that you're going to hire on a project, and then in post-production and getting distribution, you have to know who the people are that you need to contact.
So as a creative guy, is any of that kind of scary for you? Because when you're kind of exposing your art to people to do business on, how do you protect your ego?
Well, on an indie film, it's not as scary because if you're looking for executive producers in the indie world, they're typically people who are backing you, financing, and they're not having much say in the creative process. They're trusting you that once you've pitched the project and you say, this is my business plan, this is the hook, this is the concept, we think it'll sell, or we believe it'll sell, and then it's up to them to say, okay, we're putting faith in you. Whereas you don't get any notes. It's not a studio picture where if you write something, if I was to sell a spec screenplay and then someone like Paramount gets a hold of it, then it's out of my hands. I think the first thing they're thinking about is how to get me out of the project. So in indie film, it's a little less scary because the people that are coming in are relying on you to basically do the creative.
Let's talk a little bit about genre itself, because do you start out with the idea of, I'd like to do something horror, but I'd like to take a fresh look at it? Or do you just come up with a story and think, well, this would make a good horror film?
I don't particularly, I like to take a look at original concepts. And there's always that debate whether story comes from character and vice versa. But I think what's got to be, for me, is the character. I have to be able to invest in that character. There's got to be a lot of character development there, and what's important for him and what's at stake. I don't particularly look at genre. I look at all genres. I'm a fan of all genres. So I don't particularly go out and say, I need to do a horror or I need to do a comedy. I just think of concepts that come up, and as all writers do, they have a folder filled with premises. And you look at that and say, this would be a cool movie. You have to say, what is it that this hero is trying to accomplish? and what's at stake for him, and basically what's the hook, what makes it original, because there's so many films out there that try to copy the next Paranormal Activity, the next Jaws, but they don't basically copy what the characters are, and that's really what sucks us into a movie, are the characters.
So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into screenwriting?
I got into screenwriting, well, I've always been a big fan of cinema. I watched way too many movies, as my wife says, but I think I became a writer seriously back in 2004 when I started I did what most writers do or filmmakers do. They watch what's out there and they say, I can do better. And that's a foolish thing to say sometimes, because the craft of screenwriting is very involved. You have to learn it. There's so much to it. There's so many books and seminars you can go to. And in the end, they all kind of say the same thing. But I really am a big fan of story. I think that's pretty much the key. That's why I said I'm a big fan of all genres, because regardless of genre, if you give a story if you are able to tell a story that's compelling and can impact the audience, I think that's pretty much how I got involved, because I'm a big fan of story. So my first passion is screenwriting, not necessarily directing.
Just taking it from, you've written your story, you've written your screenplay, you hand it off to somebody else, you decide to produce it yourself. What is it? What makes you take that next step?
The thing about screenwriting is there are a lot of ways to break into film, obviously, and screenwriting is a tough one. You can do, and I do still play the spec writing game, where you write a lot of specs and you try to sell them, you make contacts and you try to pitch projects to studios or mini majors. But eventually a writer is going to learn that it's so hard to break in that one of the ways to actually see your screenplay on the screen is to produce it yourself. And that's eventually what we did with 19th and Wilson with Ghosts Don't Exist. We decided this is a compelling enough project or storyline and a great hook. And that's how we got a lot of investors to come on board, is with the hook. And that's something where you say, I want to make this movie as a screenwriter, and basically go out and produce it yourself.
And what is your history with 19th and Wilson?
I started with 19th and Wilson about 2002. Aaron Goodmiller is the owner of 19th and Wilson. He started it way earlier than that, but we played flag football together. And I started making some flag football videos just for fun. And Aaron saw that I was into the filmmaking and such. And we started to meet more after that, and we talked about taking 19th and Wilson even further.
Well, one of the things I like about 19th and Wilson is I see a lot of different, we were talking about genres before, in a way that I wouldn't necessarily have combined them. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know that I would have come up with an office geek mobster movie. I don't know if I would have come up with a lot of the genres. So is it just because the story can kind of take you anywhere, or are you purposely looking for how do we make this new? How do we make this fresh?
Yeah, that's something that's interesting, because a lot of us in 19th and Wilson are actually working in IT, the IT field. And we joke constantly through emails about how it's basically spoofing Goodfellas, our favorite movie. I mean, I love Scorsese, I love Goodfellas, I love The Godfathers. And we joke about how our jobs, that IT controls the office, and that we are kind of like mobsters. And so it all basically stemmed from early on, when 19th and Wilson was, honing their craft and making short films to learn the process. That's basically where it's from. It was kind of just for fun. But it's interesting, because that's pretty much what led us to believe that we could take it to the next level, because when we came out with Techfellas, it became somewhat of a viral hit. We didn't get millions of hits, but it did get some attention. And we got an email from Palak Patel, who is at the time he was with Spring Creek Productions, which did Analyze This, Analyze That, and we didn't know how big he was until we contacted him, and he said, have you ever thought about doing a full-length feature of this? And we did pitch him a project called Left Click, and CLIQUE, and it was a full-length feature of an IT genre. It was sort of a romantic comedy. that didn't really click with him, pardon the pun, but he was very interested in what we were doing and thought it was a really funny project, that Tech Fellas. But, you know, we just never got anything off the ground with him.
So are you going to stick with that? And I appreciate doing what you know. If we're a bunch of IT guys and that's what you really know and what you love, combining that. Mm-hmm. Do you have any kind of unusual combinations coming down the road?
Yeah, so along the technology genre, well, it's not really a genre, but along those technology lines, we are now producing something called Connected Apart, which is basically about a guy whose wife dies during a domestic dispute, and he tries to buy time and hides it by keeping her social networking alive. And that concept came up because my wife works from home and a couple of friends work from home, and we thought, you know, I haven't seen so-and-so in forever, but I see their blogging and I see their Facebook statuses and Twitter, and you would think that they're still alive just because they're doing that sort of thing. Because the theme is basically, today as a society, we are so much more connected yet disconnected. We don't socialize face-to-face anymore. As long as we see you tweet and Facebook, then we think you're okay. And so that's kind of, you know, that technology background. It's almost like social networking thriller. And
where are you at in the development of this?
The script is done, actually, but we've got another project going on, which is another low-budget horror, because right now the script for Connected Apart, or the project Connected Apart, is we're going for a bigger budget than Ghosts Don't Exist, and we're also going after, in the contract of our project for Connected Apart, we state that we will not greenlight without a recognizable name actor, and we have about 5 or 6 actors listed on the contract. So it's a little bit tougher to get off the ground. We want to keep busy, and so in the meantime, we're also going to do another micro-budget horror in the area.
Are you going to make some social commentary or take a position on how disconnected people have become by connecting?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's sort of where, as far as personally, this is just my opinion, that I see a lot less socializing face-to-face. I see a lot more texting and Facebook and Twitter. These are all great things. Trust, you know, I do believe these are great things, and it's really put information immediately at everyone's fingertips. But I think also that we just don't spend enough time with family and friends anymore, and so. And I also see one of our executive producers, Billy Peterson, he also pointed out there's a book called No Child Left Behind or something like that. I'm getting the title wrong, but it's a book about how kids don't go out and play anymore. They're more in the house, they're on their computer, they're playing video games, and when you interact with your friends, it's usually a text or playing online with each other. And so the playground seems to be empty now. And that's sort of how our movie begins on Connected Apart. It starts with a neighborhood that seems like a ghost town because everybody is indoors. And so it's a little bit of a social commentary. We're not trying to, you know, as the old saying goes, if you want to send a message, use Western, you know. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be didactic in anything. So we're basically just posing this kind of weird American Beauty type tone on society. And we're not trying to say, you know, this is wrong or this is right, but we're trying to show where people are going with this technology.
I'm very much looking forward to seeing your take on that and to seeing your Connected Apart. It sounds right up there with what we're concerned about today. So
right, and we have it's an interesting project or script because it centers around 3 main stories, and they kind of come together a little bit like the multiple storylines that just kind of come together in the end, like a Crash or something like that, where it's about the husband, obviously, is the center of the story, but it's about his neighbor next door who's a kid who's basically full-on geek, for lack of a better term, where he just is at home on the computer all the time, plays video games, and really hasn't interacted, and is kind of craving that social interaction, but his parents work too much. And then there's the family that we have that there's complete social, what do you call it? They just don't interact anymore. I'm trying to look for the word, but can't find it. But the family doesn't eat dinner together anymore. The son's playing the video games. The daughter is in the room on the computer with Facebook, and the husband is fantasy football looking at online and watching TV, and the wife is watching on her iPad, playing on her iPad all the time. So, it's just these stories that come together, and how technology has affected them comes kind of crashing together in the end.
Let's talk about, because this is, I think, important to all filmmakers, especially the local ones. How do you make your budgeting determinations, and how do you find the funding? Okay, this is going to be micro budget. The other one we're not going to greenlight without having a name. Mm-hmm. How do you make those decisions, and how do you get out there and get the funding for those? It's
a tough thing. It's not easy. I mean, the thing is you're going to have to go after some individuals that can afford to have disposable income, and you have to make those contacts. Obviously, we've made a few contacts in the area from Ghosts Don't Exist that we kind of go to, and then get the word out, and then you possibly hold either a meeting or an event where you can speak to them and pitch your project. It is a hard thing, especially in today's economy. That's why I said we're going to keep busy with another micro-budget project. But the reason why we would go after a bigger budget and a recognizable name is because it is going to help with distribution. It's really a tough game out there with indie films now. You really have to have, and I hear this all the time from distribution companies and producers reps, sales reps, that if you don't have a name, it's pretty much really, that's going to be a zero hard percentage to get distribution.
So there's been a lot of talk on this program about the economy of making indie films in this area. Mm-hmm. Most of the filmmakers are working on the barter system. You guys come in and you're the actors in my film, and I'll come out and hang the lights for your film, and this guy will come out and shoot. How do you get out of that economy?
That economy is interesting because it still helps a lot in the sense that if you're an indie filmmaker and you really just don't have access to the funding, then by all means try to get your movie made however you can. And the deal with that is it's almost like playing a calculated lottery, because you never know if you're going to be the next Paranormal Activity or the next Blair Witch, or a movie that gets into a major film festival and gets attention from the distribution companies. And they say, okay, well, we really like your movie, like a Napoleon Dynamite type of thing, and we want to distribute it, or we want to remake it as a full-length feature with a bigger budget. Those type of things, that's the kind of lottery you're playing. If you can, make your movie for practically zero budget and then get into a major film festival where you'll get attention, then you as a director or a filmmaker will get that attention, and then hopefully you can basically cultivate those relationships that you make. But at the same time, it's just there's the percentages in terms of who's going to actually see this film. You basically have to look at your local premieres and rent out a theater locally and get it seen that way. It's a tough game.
And what do you think about these community source funding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo?
I think they're fine. I think, again, it just goes back to trying to get your movie made any way that you can. If you believe in your concept, if you believe in the project, then if you get it made and it does, for some reason, click with an audience and it gets into a good film festival, it gets attention, again, it's your calling card. So if somebody from, I don't know, Lionsgate is at the festival and happens to look at your short film and says, that short film could easily be a full-length feature, we'll help you out with it, let's talk about that. That's the kind of game you're playing. And I know that some people, they're so passionate about film, I mean, I think most people are, that you're going to have fun playing that game. So regardless, if you can get the funding, you can get the production going, it's a lot of fun and it doesn't seem like work to you. But I think that a lot of people don't understand the business side of filmmaking as well. So you can get your Kickstarters and you can also try to pitch projects to investors, but they don't have a clear plan, a business plan of where that's going to take them. And I think that's where it gets into that side where you look at the films, the short films, and you say, you don't have a business plan, I can't invest in your project. So things like Kickstarter, I think it's okay if you're trying to get onesie twosies here, but if you're really looking for a big investor, you really have to have a business plan together.
So let me know if this is going too far beyond your expertise, but let's talk about that for a minute. In order to have investors, there has to be some sort of a return on their investment. Otherwise, they're just donors. Yeah. So, right?
Right.
But when you set out to offer for them to invest, what kind of a return on the investment can you offer them?
So yeah, you're actually getting out of my area a little bit. I write and direct. I'm more of the creative side of 19th and Wilson, and Aaron Goodmiller, who's the CEO of 19th and Wilson, he's also a producer. And he is the one who talks a lot of the business side and the business plan. But yeah, there are a certain set of numbers that you have. When you have your business plan, you also talk about the return on investment and what the offerings are. And that's the sort of thing that Aaron puts together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For Indie Capital, I'm Pamela Nash, and this has been Eric Espejo.